Hello film fans and welcome to ClassAct, a series where we break down movies sequence by sequence in order to better understand how they were written. In this episode, we're taking a look at Pixar's 23rd animated feature, Soul, written by Pete Docter, Mike Jones, and Kemp Powers. Now, talking to people about this movie, it seems to hit a particularly sensitive note for my artist and athlete friends, and for good reason. As people with really intense passions, we often put pressure on ourselves to achieve success with our craft, sometimes at the expense of the little things in life that make us truly happy. And that's what Soul is all about. At least for me, it's an incredibly introspective and personal film, and yet another example from Pixar of how three-act structure is more than just a paint-by-number template. Used correctly, it's a framework for telling spectacularly moving and emotional stories. Plotting out the film, it does follow Pixar's traditional three-act structure, with the first act ending at minute 29 and the second act ending at minute 76, with the inciting incident at minute 9, the midpoint at minute 64, and the climax at minute 82. Let's go beat by beat through the structure of the film, starting with the first 9 minutes, the introduction of the protagonist. We meet Joe Gardner on a normal humdrum day at work, where he's a part-time music teacher at a middle school in New York City. Right away, the sequence establishes Joe's everyday world, and in classic Pixar fashion, his life is unbalanced and unfair. He has a talent that he longs to show to the world, but much like Ratatouille and Mr. Incredible, his universe is one in which no one cares about or appreciates his special gift. Straight away, the school offers Joe a full-time teaching job, and through his hesitation to accept it, we see his fatal flaw, his inability to appreciate life, which is really a result of his unhealthy obsession with his dream. Joe believes that his life hasn't started yet and that it won't start until he gets his big break as a musician, a belief that holds him back in everything from his career to his relationship with his mother, who wishes he'd wake up and realize the gift that he's being given.
Just think, playing music will finally be your real career. You're going to tell them yes, right?
As he struggles with whether or not to take the job, Joe gets a call from Curly, a former student of his, who presents him with the opportunity of a lifetime, an audition to join the band of jazz legend Dorothea Williams. Naturally, Joe jumps at the chance, and at the audition, he goes into the zone, that magical spiritual place where an artist becomes one with his craft. Snapping back to reality, Joe's pleased to learn that he nailed the audition. Dorothea tells him to get a nice suit for the show, and if he plays well tonight, he just might be the new full-time band member she's been looking for. Thrilled that his life is finally about to start, Joe hurries back toward his apartment, and because his flaw is both literally and metaphorically distracting him from what's right in front of his eyes, he fails to see an open manhole in the ground, leading us to the first major plot point at minute 9, the inciting incident. In this moment, Joe falls down the manhole and wakes up as an untethered soul in limbo, headed toward a cosmic white light called the Great Beyond. Now, it's important to note what the universe is asking of Joe in this moment. In his old life, he was blindly focused on one outcome, getting his big break as a musician so that his life could finally start. But now, the universe is challenging him to look back at his life with perspective and accept that the whole time he was waiting for his life to start, he was already living it and missing out on the little moments that made it meaningful. Naturally, he's going to have some resistance to this, which brings us to the next sequence, minutes 9 through 29, in which Joe tries everything in his power to avoid going to the Great Beyond. Now, it's worth mentioning that this section is a little longer than usual because it's where literally all of the exposition in the movie happens. Joe runs away from the Great Beyond and falls into a mystical and mysterious new location called the Great Before. It's here that he meets Jerry, a collection of cosmic monodimensional beings responsible for giving baby souls their personalities and preparing them for life on Earth. After a few unsuccessful attempts to escape, Joe learns that if he doesn't want to die and go to the Great Beyond, he'll have to become a mentor, which is essentially an old soul that helps a young soul find its spark. At a cheesy corporate presentation called the U Seminar, we get a big info dump of exposition. Basically, a spark is the passion that motivates a soul, and once a soul finds its spark, it receives its Earth Pass, allowing it to travel to Earth and begin living life. Of course, all this information does is give Joe an idea. He'll help a young soul find its spark and then steal its Earth Pass and get back to his body in time for the jazz show, where he'll get his big break and finally start living. Unfortunately, that plan goes south pretty quickly as Joe meets his mentee, 22, an unmotivated soul who doesn't want to live on Earth at all and has never found her spark. Of course, Joe doesn't know it, but 22 is the perfect companion for him, as she's his direct opposite. While he can't start living his life because he cares too much about one thing, she can't start living her life because because she doesn't care about anything. In this way, they both need to learn the same lesson, to appreciate the journey, a philosophy that right now they're both pretty opposed to. Meanwhile, we meet the de facto villain of the story, Terry, a cosmic accountant who notices that someone's soul is missing from the great beyond and sets out to figure out who it is. After trying and failing to help 22 find her spark, Joe is once again faced with eternity in the great beyond, but luckily 22 takes pity on him and the two make a run for it, leading us right into minute 29, the end of Act 1. In this moment, 22 brings Joe to her secret hideout and declares that she's gonna help him get back to his body on Earth and start living life.
Your life is sad and pathetic, and you're working so hard to get back to it. Why? I mean, this I gotta see.
It's time for Act 2. Act 2 of Soul can be looked at in 3 major segments, the first of which runs about 20 minutes from 29 to 49. In this segment, both Joe and 22 enter brand new worlds with strange and unfamiliar rules. First up is Joe, who follows 22 into a secret area of the Great Before that he actually recognizes, the Zone. Turns out, the Zone is an intermediate space between the physical and spiritual realms, and it's where passionate people like Joe go when they're in a flow state with their art. In the Zone, Joe and 22 meet a shamanistic traveler and New York City sign twirler named Moonwind Stardancer, whose life purpose is to help lost souls find their way back home. Moonwind tells Joe how lost souls are created, laying out the philosophy that the universe is trying to teach him.
The Zone is enjoyable, but when that joy becomes an obsession, one becomes disconnected from life.
Moonwind opens up a portal to Earth, and an overeager Joe accidentally drags 22 in with him, causing them both to wake up on Earth inside the wrong bodies. 22 now occupies Joe's body, while Joe is trapped inside of a cat. Freaking out, the heroes come up with a plan. They're gonna go out into the real world, track down Moonwind, and get their souls back to where they belong. Now, what's important about this sequence is that it's really all about 22, as over the next 15 or so minutes, she experiences moment after moment of little joys in life. Joe brings her into New York City, and when she gets overwhelmed by all the sights and sounds, he gives her moment of joy number 1, a taste of New York pizza.
It's so good!
Racing off to find Moonwind, Joe and 22 learn that he can fix their Freaky Friday problem, but he has to do it at exactly 6:30 p.m., which conveniently is half an hour before Joe's big concert. Back at Joe's apartment, 22 answers a knock at the door and meets Connie, one of Joe's students at the middle school, who's here to declare that she's quitting music for good. Naturally, 22's all in favor of quitting things, but as she watches Connie play the trombone, she experiences moment of joy number 2.
Wow. You really love this.
At the end of the sequence, 22 has a change of heart. She encourages Connie to keep playing music and takes her first big step, declaring that she's open to finding her spark and giving life on Earth a chance.
If Connie can find something she loves here, maybe I can too.
Finally, we get a quick check-in with the villain as Terry figures out Joe's identity and sets out to bring him back, leading us right into the next section from minutes 49 to 64, where the movie shifts focus back to Joe as he experiences a few little epiphanies of his own. First, he accidentally messes up his hair, forcing him and 22 to take a detour to the local barbershop for a quick cleanup. In this scene, Joe sits back and watches as 22 talks with his barber Dez, and as he listens to the conversation, he's struck with epiphany number 1, that all these years he missed out on a real opportunity for friendship with Dez because he was so narrowly focused on himself.
How come we never talked about your life before?
You never asked, but it is nice to finally talk to you about something other than jazz, yo.
Heading back to meet Moonwind, 22 starts to appreciate the little things in life just a tiny bit too much and accidentally rips Joe's pants, and with no tailor shop open this late in the afternoon, Joe now has to face his worst nightmare, asking his disapproving mother for help. As expected, the conversation is brutal. Joe's mom confronts him about his obsessive and unhealthy relationship with music, leading Joe to epiphany number 2, that he's never just been honest with his mom before.
I'm just afraid that if I died today, that my life would have amounted to nothing.
And with that, we arrive at minute 64, the midpoint, where Joe finally shares a real, honest moment of connection with his mom. In a grand gesture of acceptance, she gives him his dad's old suit and tells him the one thing he's always wanted to hear, that she's proud of him. Unfortunately, the victory is short-lived as we now enter the back half of Act 2, a 12-minute segment from 64 to 76 in which everything that could possibly go wrong does. Arriving at the jazz club to wait for Moonwind, 22 now gets cold feet and declares that she wants to stay on Earth so that she can find her life's purpose. She runs away, and just as Joe is about to catch up to her, Terry intercepts them both and brings their souls back to the Great Before for punishment. It's here that Joe and 22 have a massive blowout fight, each accusing the other of ruining his or her life, and when 22 suddenly realizes that her Earth Pass has been activated, Joe takes the low road and says the most hurtful thing he can.
You hated everything until you were me.
Deeply hurt, 22 throws away her Earth Pass and runs off, while the Jerrys inform Joe that although music might have been his spark, it was never the purpose or meaning of his life. And it just keeps getting worse as Joe races back to Earth and makes it to the jazz club where he dazzles the audience and achieves the one thing he always wanted, a full-time job with Dorothea's band, only to realize that it doesn't fulfill him as much as he thought it would.
I've been waiting on this day for my entire life. I thought I'd feel different.
And so we arrive at minute 76, the end of Act 2, in which Joe and 22 have lost everything. Their friendship is ruined, 22 has become a lost soul, and Joe is now confronted with the horrible reality that he failed to appreciate life's journey while he was living it. In this moment, Joe makes a decision, the one decision he never would have made at the beginning of the film, to go back to the Great Before, give 22 her Earth Pass, and let her start living life the way he never did. Act 3 begins with a short sequence from minutes 80 to 82 in which Joe goes back into the zone, finds Moonwind, and sets out to save 22 from an eternity wandering the zone as a lost soul. And with the stage now set, it's time for the main event at minute 82, the climax, in which Joe chases after the terrified lost soul of 22 and finally tells her what the universe wanted them both to know all along, that the little moments in life are what make it worth living. Shedding her fear, 22 accepts her Earth Pass and takes the big leap of faith, saying goodbye to Joe as she heads down to Earth to start living her life. In the last 2 minutes, Jerry stops Joe on his way to the Great Beyond and offers him a second chance, and as Joe steps back into his life on Earth, he vows to get it right this time and appreciate every little moment. And that's it. Soul in 3 acts. A long time ago, I watched a talk with Kevin Smith called Superman Lives, where he told the story of how he almost got to write a Superman movie, and he recalls the producer of the film telling him Superman had to fight a giant spider in the 3rd act. This is what so many movies do. They let action and plot drive the story, and then later they find ways to retrofit things like theme and character on top of it. But what impresses me the most about Pixar films, especially Soul, is that they seem to be written the opposite way. The 3-act structure is built entirely on the inner journey of the character, and then the visual elements like physical action are crafted specifically to reflect that inner journey. I love to study this stuff, so please do leave your analyses down below in the comments, and feel free to like and subscribe for more movie breakdowns in the 3-act model and beyond. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on ClassAct.